Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Rumble. Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Rumble. Testing 1 2. YouTube. Testing 1 2. YouTube. Testing 1 2. YouTube. Testing. Okay, it appears that the volume's working properly and we're live on both Rumble and YouTube. Stand by. Volume's working properly. Oh my gosh. Just clicked off of it. Well, give me a break. Okay, got back again. Took myself out of my own live stream there for a second or two. But anyways, all right. I don't have fancy studios. I don't have what do you call that? Publishers or people that put all these live streams together. The audio, the video, the playing back of videos of other channels and all that stuff. Bear with me. But guess what? What people have, what is the great value of this channel? Area space 111 on YouTube, the area space 111 on YouTube, and the area 111 without the space on Rumble that has the blue background avatar with a capital white letter A. Okay. Now I'm area 111 without the space on Rumble and area 111 profile on True Social. So if you'd like to follow this channel, I appreciate it. I'm providing this service free of charge, not monetized. You don't have to listen to me read off a bunch of, sponsor ads and all that kind of thing, which I support other channels. If you do that, hey, my hat's off to you. Great job. You know what I mean? If you got a service, you have a service, you're sharing information to, around the world, including, of course, priority for me is the United States of America. My hat's off to you. Great job. I mean, I hope you're very successful at it. And I hope you become a multimillionaire, a multimillionaire. If your aspirations are to be a billionaire or a multi-billionaire, and more power to you. It's an honest living, right? So I do this service for our country, for the citizens in our country, mainly, free of charge. This is my own personal time that I utilize to basically help others understand certain things. And of course, I have a military background. That was my career for over 20 years in the United States Air Force. So I have a little bit of background knowledge in some of the things I'm talking about. So anyways, so far, it's only myself here on YouTube, and they've been really throttling back this channel. Good to see you, Canito. Glad you caught that. Now it's Saturday night. I know it's kind of late for those on the East Coast. I know those that work hard every day. You know, they're not up at 10:30 at night. They're already asleep. You know, but anyways, that's why I'm happy I can save these live streams on both YouTube and Rumble. Now, if you're trying to go back and look at other live streams, yeah, Massachusetts, that's East Coast, Eastern Standard Time, I guess you call it, right? Too as well. So that's good. I try to get in by 9 o'clock at night Eastern Standard Time, but also you have to think about our friends on the West Coast. They're 2 or 3 hours behind. So I have people that follow me from that live in Washington State. I was stationed up in Washington State. That was my first permanent change of station after I left tech school from Keesler Air Force Base, Mississippi in 1979. Okay. First duty station was McCord Air Force Base in Tacoma, Washington State. But anyways, I think I got a really interesting live stream tonight. I'm going back to the very first paper currency delivered to the United States Treasury, and gold-backed debate, the gold-backed debate. So anyways, there's a lot of basically arguments and people. I'm not going to get in that crowd of arguing. I'll share those people, the source references. If you want to argue your point of gold-backed currency or silver-backed currency, you have a right to do so. But this is what I'm going to talk about first. Well, maybe I should go in chronological order, right? And talk about the first paper currency delivered to United States, U.S. Treasury. Okay, so to give y'all a quick background on that, the U.S. currency, the first paper U.S. currency was delivered to the U.S. Treasury Department on August 23rd, 1861. The very first paper currency. Okay. Now, it was called an American note. Now, I have to go back in where I can basically zoom in on the photograph. Now, remember, this goes all the way back to August 23rd, 1861. The first sheets of currency, 4 notes per sheet, were delivered to the U.S. Department to the U.S. Treasury Department on August 23rd, 1861. So, let's see here. The first paper money issued by the United States was authorized by Congress. That's very important, right? On July 1861. So it wasn't delivered to the U.S. Treasury Department until August 23rd, 1861. So where did they print? Where did they print the currency? So I wrote that down somewhere on my piece of paper. Hold on a second. The first American paper currency that was authorized by the U.S. Congress and delivered to the U.S. Treasury Department on August 23rd, 1861 was, let's see, I'll read it to y'all now. I got it written on another piece of paper, so bear with me. It was called an American banknote. This is very important. American banknote, not a foreign banknote, right? Not a foreign banknote. It was basically printed American banknote by the American Banknote Company in New York. Okay, that was where it was printed. So now you understand, okay, they didn't have means of like air travel back then. They had horse and buggy, and that kind of thing. So that's the reason why it took a while for it to get to the U.S. Treasury Department. Of course, they had to secure those deliveries. Basically had to have foot soldiers, and this was basically what they're using because they had I believe they had a Confederate. Just don't like what RH has to say. And I can feel, man, okay, I'm not going to say it. But, anyways, this is kind of ridiculous. I just started in on the live stream and already trying to take this channel down again. Man, they're hitting this channel really hard, really hard. Because in history, when this channel started out, I was having thousands of viewers for a single live stream. And now I'm lucky if I have 4 or 5, right? So, anyways, I'm not whining about it. That's just the way it is. That's crony capitalism at its best, whatever. You know what I mean? So, anyways, I want to read again, and this is a very touchy topic for a lot of people. They'll get furious with RH, and RH is just putting out the information and providing source references for everyone else to go check out. So my main source reference of what our currency should be now versus what it's morphed into, or I guess you call it morphed into. Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Kenito. I really appreciate it. But anyways, this is from our U.S. Constitution. Remember, it's the supreme law of the land. This is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 of our U.S. Constitution. Congress shall have the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin, and fix the standards of weights and measures. Okay? So who has the power to basically print currency? Because obviously everything isn't done by coin now, right? We understand what it means. Congress shall have the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin, and fix the standards of weights and measures. So remember, could you imagine now just trying to go out there and buy a car with all pennies? Could you imagine that, using those coins? You know, those coins cost more to print than the value of the money itself. And of course, probably the same with the printing our paper currency, but I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's a lot cheaper to print a paper note, American note, right? Than it is to basically coin it. Yeah. Well, I want to get into that, and I want to share history because there's a precedent set in history far as gold-back and silver-back coin currency, paper currency. Now, I'm going to say this, and you know, there's going to be people that don't like it. You know, I understand that. I understand the positions. I understand pretty much every single argument out there about wanting to go to gold-back or silver-back currency. But if we fail to learn from history, we're doomed to repeat it. And I'll share you an article for everyone's own personal research. You can go to this article. It's from Time Magazine, okay, dated February 12th, 1965. But I want to finish the first part of the live stream, which is about the currency itself. Now, remember, the first sheets of currency, 4 notes per sheet, were delivered to the U.S. Treasury on August 23rd, 1861. It was issued finally after it was basically delivered to the U.S. Treasury. So it looks like they delivered it from the American Bank Note Company. It doesn't say Federal Reserve or Foreign Reserve on it, right? The American Bank Note Company, New York. So they had to have a printing press, right? So what did they do? They printed the sheets of paper currency. On the front and the back, you had the front note, and then you had the back side of the note, right, which is down there on the bottom that you see in the avatar photograph. Now you can go to this yourself and, you know, check it out yourself. And, you know, I went to Wikipedia and this kind of thing. You know, this is well over 70 years old, and I think people know what I'm talking about. We're talking about going back to 1861. Okay. Remember what happened from 1860 to 1865? There was the uncivil war, right? So, anyways, now I know that the colony, I think I can't remember exactly the colony that started at first, printing paper money, you know, paper notes. But, you know, that's pre-Constitution days. That's pre-U.S. Constitution days, remember? So the supreme law of our land is the U.S. Constitution, not somebody's faulty logic. Let's just go that way. Okay, so now let me repeat this again. The first paper money issued by the United States was authorized by Congress on July 1861. Okay, that was not colonial currency. Obviously, the Declaration of Independence occurred and we became a sovereign, independent country in 1776. So there's people out there that'll argue about that too as well. I'm not into that crowd of being arguing all the time. I want to move forward. I don't want to be stuck in neutral, revving up the engine, for full revs and just sitting there in neutral the whole time. You know what I mean? Not going anywhere. We want to go somewhere on this channel, right? So, anyways, now this is RH's opinion. Now, let me make this very clear. The first paper money issued by the United States was authorized by the United States Congress on July 1861. Okay. The first sheets of currency, 4 notes per sheet, were delivered to the Treasury Department on August 23rd, 1861. On August 26th, those sheets of currency, 4 per sheet, was issued to citizens. Now, what did the citizens have to do? The citizens had to get some scissors, right, and cut those notes out. Those 4 notes, they were responsible for cutting the notes, and that's why. Do y'all remember those old paper cutters? I'm pretty sure whenever they just started delivering these American bank notes to local banks or whatever, state-run banks, or whatever, in the first original states of United States of America. I'm pretty sure they had those big old metal paper cutters. Remember those? It has like a big metal bar with what do you call that? Where you grind the edges sharp, and you just basically you hold the sheets in place, right? And you just cut them in 4 sections, right? And then you have to cut, okay, 4 sections. And then you have you have the note, 4 notes with front and back, right? Printed on the front and back. As you see, was a bad, I don't know how to get away to that round circle. I just wanted a square, but I did something and I forgot where I did it at. But I think I used to have a square avatar photograph. I wish I can get back to that again, but I tried to click around on different things and I couldn't find that before the night's live stream. So, but I wanted to get to it. Man, they took the channel down again. Can you believe it, people? Dang, I had to restart the whole channel again. I'm hopefully let's see if we're still live on Rumble. We still have the volume. So pardon me for having that. Man, they're really trying to hit me now. Big time. Big time. We're talking about our own sovereignty, our own independence again, right? There's some actors out there that don't like hearing this at all. At all. So, um, what I think is going to happen, we're going to have to. We cannot. We cannot continue on with this debt based economy, right? We cannot keep this going on. I mean, we are 36 or 37 trillion dollars in debt. 36 or 37 trillion dollars in debt, right? Um 36 or 37 trillion dollars in debt. We shouldn't have foreign entities, whatever they are, pressuring us, right, to basically charge us interest on us printing our own money. Do you think they were doing this under President Lincoln back in 1861? Do you think foreign there was foreign influence on printing our first paper currency that was authorized by our U.S. Congress? I don't think so. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't think so. We basically relinquished somewhere along the line. I think it was somebody said 1871 or something like that, or I mean, I have reviewed some of that, but I can't remember it all. There's so much information to go through when you're looking at that, you know. So the Congress is supposed to basically, not basically, they have the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof. So we shouldn't have foreign influencing us to devalue our currency for whatever means, right? And they shouldn't be devaluing their currency so they can dump all their goods in our country, right? So this is the reason why there's these tariffs now, because of this what do you call it, federal what do you call that, trade deficits. I mean, trade deficits in the amount of, just from one country alone, we're looking at $500 billion in trade deficit. That means their trade and dumping all their stuff into our country, right? um their exports coming into our country was worth $500 billion a year more than our exports to their country. So President Trump is starting to bring back manufacturing to our country. We have to, because that brings up the value of our currency, right? So they can't, attack our currency and basically devalue it. And, we have all this high inflation and everything else, you know what I mean? So, um, yeah, supply and demand, right? Supply and demand. If we have our own manufacturing, right, of especially critical, like national security, like manufacturing, I mean, we won't be dependent on foreign countries, you know what I mean? Foreign countries in case something really bad happens, like chips, and all that kind of thing, processors. So we have to bring that back to our country. We have to. That's a national security issue. And President Trump is working very hard to ensure we retain our sovereignty, especially our economic sovereignty, right, in our country. So I do believe there's going to be a change. Now, what I'm going to get into this. Now, according to what I researched, when we're talking about gold-backed currency, um, there's approximately 190,000 tons of gold in the world. That's what I looked up. Now I don't know if that's how accurate that figure is, because a lot of people, they get gold, right? They get gold and they hoard it, right? They bury it or something, or whatever they do with their gold, or they just for hard times or whatever. You know, that's part of a lot of people's prepping. I understand why you do it, but could you imagine trying to divide up like $10 from 1 ounce of gold, like just $10, or maybe a $20 of gold? Could you imagine trying to divide that up? You know what I mean? From a 1 ounce gold bar, whatever. I mean, if you have a gold backed currency, that's going to have to be what do you call it? Fractional currency. The dollar, the bill, the dollar notes, gold backed currency notes would have to be fractional currency. And we got what, gold's over $3,000 an ounce. So could you imagine trying to cut up just $20 worth of gold out of a 1 ounce gold bar, right, for just $20 when it's valued at over $3,000 an ounce? Could you imagine the nightmare of that? Look, back then in the day, in 1861, the the 4 notes per sheet was issued to U.S. citizens. They basically they cut those sheets in fours, right? So they can have 4 notes. That was $40, $40, 4 $10 notes. But there was not a Federal Reserve note, which is made up by private foreign banks. Okay, so that's the reason why this channel is being hit hard. In my opinion, that's just one of the many reasons. So, 190,000 tons. That's 2,000 times 190. What is that? 380,000, right? 380,000 pounds of gold, right? Am I right? No, not 380. Yeah, 380, because there's 2,000 pounds per ton. Oh, I don't know. It's try to figure out, though, of 190,000 tons of gold, of 190,000 tons of gold. Could you imagine trying to figure out what you know, how much that's worth? There's a mathematician here. You got a really, really big calculator that you got about 100 digits. You could basically figure that out by ounce. How many ounces of gold there is in the world? You have to, man, 16 ounces per pound, right? You know the deal, right? I'm not going to do it, but just imagine that. 3,000 times, was it 380,000 pounds? Man, That's but I was saying at one time there isn't enough gold on this planet to basically have gold back paper currency, right? So if you got if you want to exchange your gold back paper currency for gold, right? You have uh they have to exchange it. So what happened in history, reason why um I'm kind of like hitting the brakes while I research this stuff. I mean, it sounds good, right? I remember having silver certificates. I remember having a dollar silver certificate, backed by silver. But you have to go to President Kennedy's EO 11110. There's 5 zeros, 5 ones, and a zero. President Kennedy's. If you want to read about the silverback currency notes, go back and visit President John F. Kennedy's EO 11110. Okay. So now I'm going to transition to the reason why history should have taught us a lesson about what all other foreign countries are going to do if we go to a gold backed currency. This has happened in history. Okay. I'm going to find the article. Stand by. I'm going to have to delete some of these source tabs or whatever pages. Okay. Stand by. Hopefully I'm being coherent here when I'm talking about this stuff. Okay, I got executive order 1-1. That's actually 4 1s and a zero. 4 1s and a zero. It wasn't 5 1s and a zero. Good. I'm glad I fact checked myself here. Let me read this real quick. And it was different than what I thought it was. Okay, executive order 1111 was issued by U.S. President John F. Kennedy on June 4th, 1963. This executive order amended Executive Order 10289 dated September 17th, 1951 by delegating to the Secretary of the Treasury the President's authority to issue silver certificates under the Thomas Amendment of the Agricultural Adjustment Act, as amended by the Gold Reserve Act. The order allowed the Secretary to issue silver certificates if any were needed during the transition period under President Kennedy's plan to eliminate silver certificates and use Federal Reserve notes. So I thought Kennedy put us on the silver certificate currency, paper currency. And basically, the order was to phase that out. And I did have, as a child, you could find like dollar bill silver certificates, and they're kind of raggedy, so there's still a lot of people that held on to them, but I remember having them actually, and they were still in circulation when I was a kid. And even into the late 70s and early 80s, you could find silver certificates out there. So y'all have to go in and look at this and go back to the Gold Reserve Act and read all these acts by Congress or the EOs, right? So I'm glad I found that was still there. So I'm going to read this definition of extortion again. Extortion, meaning in law, The term extortion refers to the crime of obtaining money or property by using threats of harm against the victim or against the property of or family. Means threats of harm. So what foreign country's trying to extort our president right now? Threats to family members and everything like that, right? Okay, I won't touch on that any longer. There's threats due to tariffs and money and that kind of thing, right? Threats. They might not be so out in the open, but there are. Okay, and I'm getting to now. I'm going to go ahead and read y'all off this source reference that I'm getting from why in history we should learn from history and be very, very careful before we actually Congress implements another gold-backed currency era, right? Okay, you have to go to the Time magazine article titled "Money, De Gaulle versus V. the Dollar." This was basically printed or published on February 12th of 1965. So we go back, remember that Kennedy Executive Order 1111 was issued when? On June 4th of 1963. So this article came out February 12th of 1965 that I'm going to be referring to from now on. Now, I'm going to say this, and this is my opinion. You could say all of these are my opinions, right? I'm not accusing anyone of doing anything. Everyone, at least American citizens, are innocent until proven guilty by a court of law. Okay? I shouldn't even have to say that. Our founding fathers, when they created the Constitution, they didn't stipulate, oh, your free speech has to be prefaced with, this is my opinion, right? But we also know that we could be held liable, so that's the reason why I'm respectful. Okay, I'm trying to get to the. Oh man! Since I got this tab up, I'm going to read it. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. That's from the King James Authorized Version. Okay, I thought that was kind of important because I didn't read it the other night and I wanted to. So now another thing, which is kind of like a very sore spot, as far as I was totally against this, based on trafficking. You know what's in current events now, right? I'm going to talk about this again just really quickly before I get to that Times article regarding our dollar. They had what they call North American Man-Boy Love Association. Now, This is from Wikipedia, right? The North American Man Boy Love Association, NAMBLA, stylized as NAMBLA, is a pedophilia and pederasty advocacy organization in the United States. It works to abolish age of consent laws, criminalizing adult sexual involvement with minors, and campaigns for the release of men who have been jailed for sexual contacts with minors that did not involve what it considers coercion. Okay? So they want to legal. This goes all the way back to the 90s. I thought this was something that just came out around 2010. No, because when I first started writing against this stuff, right, I thought it was that time I learned about this organization, right, was in 2010. And when I first heard about it, I was shocked. I didn't even know that was stuff out there. Okay. This was 30 years before I learned about it. So, in case y'all don't know about this stuff going on from these people, it's been going on quite a long time. So, when we're talking about the echo files, what do you call it? List or whatever. Been people that have gotten away with this stuff for a long time, it appears to me. And if they have dealings with underage children, they should be arrested. You got the evidence, you know, everyone's presumed to be innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. From my understanding, there's a lot of sealed indictments out there. Okay, so the article I want to get into, let's get back to the main topic of tonight's live stream, is gold-backed currencies. Now, this is a 10-minute read. Again, this is a Time Magazine article titled Money, D-Gall versus the Dollar. Okay, D, that's capital D, E space, capital G, A, lowercase a, U-L-L-E, V, period, the dollar. Okay, it's a 10-minute read. At least that's what they said. This was published on February 12th of 1965. Now, I'll be honest and honest. This is really what caught my attention. So let's go into this article. Perhaps never before had a chief of state launched such an open assault on the monetary power of a friendly nation, nor had anyone of such stature made so sweeping a criticism of the international monetary system since its founding in 1944. There was Charles de Gaulle last week proclaiming. So last week, that was in early February of 1965. There was Charles de Gaulle last week proclaiming that the primacy of the dollar in international dealings was finished, calling for an eventual return to the gold standard, which the world's nations scrapped 50 years ago. And practically inviting other countries to follow France's lead and cash in their dollars for gold. It was a particularly nettling irritant, just as the U.S. was deeply involved in making some hard decisions about its monetary policy. The drain. President Johnson faces the unpleasant task of producing what he calls strong and specific actions to deal with the persistent U.S. balance of payments deficit, a problem intimately related to gold. The president's advisors are still debating just how strong these imminent measures should be. So what There is a growing awareness, heightened by de Gaulle's offensive, that past attempts to close the payments gaps have been more palliatives and palliatives. I'm probably not pronouncing that properly, but if you go to the article, you can look it up. Palatable, maybe, but that's not how it's spelled. And that the problem has begun to undermine U.S. influence around the globe. Just before de Gaulle spoke, Treasury Secretary Douglas Dillon made the first public admission that the U.S. payments deficit in 1964 moved higher than anyone had expected. It totaled about $3 billion, all of which the U.S. is legally committed to exchange for U.S. gold on demand. The Federal Reserve announced that the U.S. gold supply declined last week by 100 million to a 26-year low of 15.1 billion. So now there's a lot of people questioning if there's even any gold left. Hey, good to see you, Tracy. I just saw you're in the chat there. Thanks for being with us tonight. Now, if you're just coming in late tonight, you should probably go back and review the entire live stream from the beginning. And remember, there's going to be dead airspace time because they're hitting this channel hard again tonight. So again, we only have 4 viewers besides myself, so totally 5 viewers on YouTube. Let me go look at. I'm keeping a close eye on this stuff right now. Man, I'm sick of these gatekeepers, right? I'm really sick of these gatekeepers. But anyways, it is what it is. So anyways, let's get down to this. So basically, we had gold, right? We had a lot of gold, but a lot of that was stolen during World War II, remember? A lot of the European gold was stolen during World War II from Nazi Germany, right? Remember all the banks and stuff that was looted in Europe during World War II? No. So, and then we had all these bills coming due, right? We had, the gold-backed currency. I think they banned it. Was against the law for any American citizen to actually have gold, right? Back then. But I have to go. I'm not a leading expert on this stuff, but this is what I've gotten. This is what I have to basically base my opinion on. So, and this is, in my opinion, the reason why the foreign reserve banks, they are basically charging us interest for us printing our own money, which that should not be happening because, in my opinion, that's unconstitutional debt. Because, never mind, when they charge us that interest and we pay back that debt, what do you think they're taking from us? Where have they been storing all this gold, in my opinion? Well, it kind of like is, in my opinion, kind of like common sense that it's stored in the Federal Reserve Bank, private bank vaults, right? Have we gotten our money? Have we gotten our gold back? Or is Fort Knox, and that's classified, is Fort Knox empty? Hey, Winlow, good to see you. Good to see you, Winlow. Haven't seen you in a while. So okay, this article, right? It talks about the Federal Reserve announced that the U.S. gold supply declined last week. The Federal Reserve. We're talking foreign private banks are basically included in the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve announced that the U.S. gold supply declined last week by 100 million to a 26-year low of $15.1 billion. Okay. Could you imagine what our GDP is? $26 trillion now, right? I have to look up and see what our GDP was back in 1965. The first week of looks like first week of 1965 that this was taking place. Okay. So let me go back. Let me read this again. Just before Charles de Gaulle spoke, Treasury Secretary Douglas Dillon made the first public admission that the U.S. payments deficit in 1964 moved higher than anyone had expected. It totaled about $3 billion, all of which the U.S. is legally committed to exchange for gold, U.S. gold on demand. That's gold-backed currency. The Federal Reserve announced that the U.S. gold supply declined last week by 100 million to a 26-year low of 15.1 billion. 26-year low. It goes back to the 40s, right? Back then from 26 years minus February of 1965. France converted 150. This is very important right here. This is the point I'm trying to make. France converted 150 million US dollars into gold last month. Plans another $150 million conversion soon. Following that lead, Spain has quietly exchanged $60 million of its dollar reserves for U.S. gold. The biggest such transaction of the Franco era. To free more gold to meet rising demand, a congressional committee last week approved by President Johnson's proposal to eliminate the 25% gold backing now legally required for deposits held in the Federal Reserve System. But concern is growing in Washington that nations that have so far refrained from converting dollars out of the consideration of the U.S. may cash them in for gold once the extra bullion becomes available, and thus send still more gold-laden truckloads rolling out of Fort Knox. So this appears to me, based on history, this is where all our gold has gone to from Fort Knox. So have you heard this information anywhere on any other channel? I mean, this is a major topic for all these major influencers, right? They have, sponsors that deal in metals, precious metals, whatever, you know what I mean? And hey, they have a right to do so. That's what we call a free market economy. And this is why I'm saying we have to separate the paper currency based on our GDP, our manufacturing output, and our exports versus the imports. And that's what I believe President Trump is doing, working with other professionals, economic professionals in the field, right? And that's the reason why we're calling for the Federal Reserve Chairman to step down. That's the reason why. Okay, remember, everyone's presumed to be innocent until proven guilty. Remember, they're going to back. Why did they create the European Union? They created the European Union to basically to be economic competitors with the United States of America, right? Economic competitors. And they had huge trade deficits as well with the United States of America, the European Union. The European Union, the GDP, once they created the European Union, they basically reached the same GDP as the United States of America. So make no doubts about it. The EU was created to be an opponent, economic opponent of the United States of America. That's why the sole purpose for them being created, even though they lost their sovereignty in a lot of those countries in Europe, they went along with it. You know, they, in many cases, for lower level or lower GDP economies in Europe, they really, or at least they thought, they had no choice. So let's read this again. But concern is growing in Washington that nations that have so far refrained from converting dollars out of consideration for the U.S. may cash them in for gold once the extra bullion becomes available, and thus send still more gold-laden truckloads rolling out of Fort Knox. So now, this is when Lyndon Johnson was in office, after, the assassination of President Kennedy. Signal privilege. Into this tense situation stepped de Gaulle, disregarding his 1963 promise to support the present international monetary system, in which the dollar plays the dominant role in all free world trade, is financed by a mix of dollars, British pounds too, right? And gold. The private reserve banks are owned by the British. I don't believe all of them. I have to go back and look at it again. It's been a long time. When I was writing about, okay, I was looking into that EO 11110 of President Kennedy and looking at the silverback currency, because this has been a hot topic for quite some time. But since President Trump, they won't even show him Fort Knox. He couldn't even get a tour. The President of the United States could not get a tour of Fort Knox. Why? I just read the reason why. We're not really a sovereign country anymore. From the looks of it. Signal privilege. Into this tense situation stepped de Gaulle, disregarding his 1960. Remember, he was the leader of France back in the day, right? His 1963 promise to support the present international monetary system, in which the dollar plays the dominant role in all free world trade, is financed by a mix of dollars, British pounds, and gold. The time has long since passed, he told a press conference, when the currencies of any one or two nations can enjoy this signal privilege, this signal advantage, can enjoy this signal privilege, this signal advantage. The present day world, said de Gaulle, needs an indisputable monetary base, and one that does not bear the mark of any particular country. In truth, one does not see how one could really have any standard criterion other than gold. What do you mean, other standard criteria? Okay. De Gaulle seemed to be calling for a somewhat modified form of the classical gold standard when he ambiguously recommended complementary and transitory measures to accompany it. Nonetheless, there was no doubting his intention to promote his drive to reduce U.S. economic, military, and cultural influence abroad. Under a gold standard, the U.S. would no longer be able to pay its foreign debts in dollars, but only in gold. U.S. businesses would have to curtail their investments in foreign companies. De Gaulle last week called such U.S. investments a form of expropriation. Until the U.S. balanced its payments in gold, American consumers would also have to reduce their purchases of foreign goods. Reason, since this is a key, another key. American consumers are going to have to, in my opinion, reduce their purchase of foreign goods. And we have to bring back manufacturing to our country. We have to bring back high-paying jobs. And that's the reason why this, and I support it 100%, where we start having technical classes in high school, teaching people, both young men and women, a trade before they leave high school, right? Do it early. I was on work experience. I got a lot of technical training in far as professional military education, and that's the reason why a lot of military men and women are sought after from these corporations. You know what I mean? So they have we had to have a good work ethic, because we got a thing called AWOL, right? You just can't leave your job. I was talking about that last night, right? But anyways, until the U.S. balances its payment in gold, American consumers would also have to reduce their purchase of foreign goods. Reason, since dollars would no longer be as good as gold, they would be cashed in abroad for gold as soon as spent. The U.S. would immediately become less potent in world economic affairs, because though it has twice the gross national product of the common market nations, it holds scarcely more gold than the six. So I was under the impression, now how are we going to how we're going to back our GDP in gold? And what's going to happen when we go immediately and that's what these foreign countries are waiting for. Don't you think people working in national security don't understand that? We're talking about U.S. national security. You don't think that they understand that? Now, how many people, when you're going to want to go to a join BRICS or whatever, you want to actually buy, you want to buy like rubles to trade them in for gold? I hope you don't have a whole lot of rubles and plan on getting a whole lot of gold from Russia. I don't know. Hey, I don't know. The dollar, the U.S. dollar, you can call it paper currency, fiat currency. You can say all those things if you want to. The dollar represents the United States economy as a sovereign country. They could say, we're not going to do any trade with you unless you basically trade with us in dollars or gold, right? They could say that. We can say the same, can't we? Once we start bringing back our industrial base that they outsource, overseas, you outsource your labor and your manufacturing overseas because they had child slavery, like child slave labor, right? In some instances, they don't have the same set of rules that we do in our country, right? You see little children digging out cobalt in certain countries, right? And what do you see them wearing? They got no shoes on, no shirt on, and a little pair of raggedy shorts. While they're climbing through these little tunnels dug out by hand, right, to basically collect cobalt. You know, we heard about the blood diamonds and all that stuff, right? So let's read this paragraph again. Stern discipline. Conscious, no doubt, of the irony involved in his unneighborly attack, de Gaulle christened his plan the Golden Rule. What could be said for his proposal? The value of money would be guaranteed by the immutability of gold. In theory, the world monetary system would become more stable, less vulnerable to crisis of confidence. By tying the money supply to gold, the system would prevent overspending. And the US and Britain, which now can pay their deficits out of their own currencies, it would impose a stern fiscal discipline, curb deficit financing, and do away with many of the excesses that lead to inflation and recessions. Among other things, it would force the US to eliminate its balance of payments deficits quickly by hook or by crook. So let's go back and read this previous paragraph again. Under a gold standard, the US would no longer be able to pay its foreign debts in dollars, but only in gold. US businessmen would have to curtail their investments in foreign companies. Until the US balanced its payments in gold, American consumers would also have to reduce their purchase of foreign goods. Reason, since dollars would no longer be as good as gold, they would be cashed in abroad for gold as soon as spent. The US would immediately become less potent in world economic affairs because though it has twice the gross national product of the common market nations, it holds scarcely more gold than the sixth. Okay. So I have to look up common market nation. So y'all could do that. And so that tells us how much gold the scarcity of our gold and back then. And this is basically in the 60s and 70s. This is basically written about the 60s and 70s. To counter criticism that the system would also paralyze international trade because of the global shortage of gold, champions of the gold standard advocate another step that they consider necessary to double or triple the $35 an ounce price of gold, thus vastly increasing the monetary reserves that finance world trade. So that's what people are going on. In my opinion, gold is hyperinflated because they believe, right, we're going to go back on the gold currency. And yeah, you know, there's a lot of hype in gold. But let me ask y'all this question. Do you actually need gold? Or are they going to make it where you need gold to buy food and water, to buy the essentials? Remember in the Bible, they were throwing their gold and their silver out on the streets and they were crying, you know, because they wanted food. You can't eat. I said this and I get a lot of heat from it, but I keep on saying it. I could basically do a Google search and find that Bible article. I mean, that verse or those verses in the Bible. You can as well. People almost have idolized gold, right? And silver. They've almost idolized gold and silver. I don't idolize the dollar. It's just something that I used to trade to buy, like food. Could you imagine? That's why we should all be as independent as possible. Grow your own food. You know, acquire a safe water source. Right? Keep stock. Keep supplies. I don't have a crystal ball to see into the future. As far as that goes, I mean, I could pray for a sign or something like that, some type of communication that I could see certain things happening in the future. But what I'm saying right now is we need to basically focus on having our survival needs, right? Food, clothing, and shelter. Of course, also that includes water, right? You can live, they said, they used to say you can live without food for 7 days. Guess how long you can't live without, you can't, after 3 days, you can't live without water. You're going to be in very bad shape if you don't, especially if you're in a desert or something, I don't know. You might, you might not survive 3 days without water, just 3 days without water. I don't know. I mean, so what I'm trying to say, and a lot of people, they got the money to go out buy all this, uh, long life food. It comes in these containers, that are the food is supposed to be good for 20 something years or 25 years. Hey, more power to you. I'm glad you have the money to do that. I really do. And like I said again, if you're sponsored by, you know, uh, companies that deal in gold and silver, hey, more power to you. They maybe you can actually start. What about your neighborhoods? How many neighbors do you have, especially in the city? Do you see growing their own food? Okay, and everybody's tied to what? City water. Do you have an outside source like a well that's filtered water where you don't have any harmful pollutants in it, whatever? Has people ever even thought about it? I know I think about it a lot. And I need to start practicing what I preach, but dang, I've been around 6.5 decades, you know what I mean? So uh I get complacent sometimes, and I I kind of like I kind of like have like a sense, a false sense of security, because it's never happened in our country. In this crazy world now where you got people calling death to America and all these innocent people in our country, I've read their documents. Strike fear in the hearts of the unbeliever, right? What do you think that means? What is an act of terrorism? An act of terrorism is striking, and it doesn't matter. I'm not saying this only applies to a certain religion, right? There's a lot of people out there that commit acts of terrorism for whatever reason, whether they're unstable, mentally unstable, or whatever. They're just plain all out crazy. But when your guide and your laws is it's associated with strike terror in the hearts of the unbeliever, what what litmus test do we have to be to basically line up with those believers of that religion or those other religions out there, or people that aren't even attached to religion. That's not a civil world. And if we just followed those 10 laws, thou shalt not murder, right? Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. Thou shalt not steal. If you just follow those three, would there ever be any wars? It's my understanding they just sacrificed a red heifer. I don't know. You know what I mean? Uh, anyways, kind of like lost my train of thought here. But yeah, we should all start to think about growing our own crops, maybe building a small greenhouse, even if you have like a balcony, you know, maybe and store your safe drinking water, somewhere where you can store it, so you don't have to rely off of like city water. That's infrastructure. What's water? If we're ever at war, guess what? They're going to look at attacking our infrastructure. So, okay, let's get back to the gold back currency again. Now, I do believe we should back our currency, our U.S. currency, whenever, and I believe we should go back to a what did they call it again? American bank, American banknotes, right? I believe we should go back to those American bank notes. Okay, so um, I understand a lot of times they want to get. Never mind. I'm just going to stick with American banknote. Okay, banknotes, and printed like as in the first U.S. American paper currency was done. Uh, that was basically approved by the U.S. Congress. So where's that at again? The first paper money issued by the United States was authorized by Congress on July 1861. Okay? That was not colonial currency, of course. We are already an independent sovereign country. Okay, and I do believe that, if I'm not mistaken, so no, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5, Congress shall have the power to coin money. They should be able to say, they should basically uh, make an amendment to Article 1, Section 8 to change the Constitution. Congress shall have the power to coin and print money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin and paper currency, and fix the standards of weights and measures. That's what I believe should be going on. Just like the Constitution, we have to realign the printing of our money back to the Constitution, not according to foreign influence. All right. Now, I mean, we can make a lot of, and could you imagine the process, how huge that process is if we did go to American banknotes again, not Federal Reserve notes, and being basically relying on them or whatever, you know. So this is where all those truckloads of gold bars were basically going out of Fort Knox, in my opinion, and that's probably top secret, very, very top secret. They won't, in my opinion, they won't even let President Trump know about it. That's why he can't even visit Fort Knox. You know, we can't even audit our agencies or whatever. So, anyways, at least in my opinion, let me look that up. I'm gonna have to fact check myself real quick. So, is that true that President Trump put the Federal Reserve underneath the U.S. Treasury? Is that true? Let me do a fact check operation here real quick. I gotta refresh my live streams, of course. Okay, we're still live on Rumble, thank God. What about YouTube? It says we're still live on YouTube as well, right? But I'm gonna have to refresh YouTube. By executive order, I'm going to do a search real quick. By executive order, so I'm fact checking this right now. To me, it's still a rumor. I heard it. Okay, this is executive order 13772, titled Core Principles for Regulating the United States Financial System. Is an executive order signed by U.S. President Donald Trump on February 3rd, 2017. The eighth executive action by the president during his first 100 days in office establishes the core principles of regulation under the Trump administration and tasks the United States Department of Treasury to view Financial Stability Oversight Council, originally established under the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act. and report to the president 120 days on current regulations and their effectiveness in carrying out these core principles. Oh man, this is like seriously long. I'm gonna have to. Has anybody's got the link to that executive order so we can kind of prove that it's not a rumor that President Trump's executive order placed the Federal Reserve under the supervision or authority of the U.S. Treasury? Please, somebody, if you can find that, post a link in the comment section. I think you can post a link though only if you're a mod. I'm not sure. I'll try to look for another. Okay, let me go. Okay. I think it's another executive order. Investopedia, I don't know. This is an official source, but let me read this. The U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve are separate entities. The Treasury manages the money that the government brings in and pays out. The Federal Reserve primarily responsibility is to manage the money supply. Oh, come on. I want these pop-up ads come right up over what I'm reading, right? The Federal Reserve's primary responsibility is to manage the money supply and interest rates. The Department of Treasury manages federal spending. It collects the government's tax revenues, distributes its budget, issues its bonds, bills, and notes. Okay, so right here it says the Department of Treasury issues notes, right? And literally prints the money. The Treasury Department is headed by cabinet level appointee who advises the president on monetary and economic policy. The Federal Reserve is the central banking system of the United States and is run by a board of governors that oversees 12 regional Federal Reserve banks. See, what they leave out there is there's private Federal Reserve banks, right? Central banks. Its primary goals are to regulate the nation's private banks and manage the overall money supply to keep inflation and the employment rate stable. The Federal Reserve Board is accountable to the U.S. Congress, not the president. So the U.S. Congress, as far as Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5, the U.S. Congress shall have the power to coin and, in my opinion, print money, regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin, and I believe bills, and fix the standards of weights and measures. So that's Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5. Does Congress have the power to delegate that authority to the US Treasury or to the Federal Reserve? I don't know. Maybe somebody can clarify that better than I can. And if you can, you're invited on this live stream. I'll bring you up on the panel. You know, if I can verify who you actually are or not, you know, and who you claim to be, but you're not. If I can verify that, if you're the legit, right, I'll bring you up on the panel, and you can have your argument with me. But I'm not going to go for hours and hours with arguing against gold-backed currency because of what has happened in history. The Department of Treasury is by far the older of the two institutions. It was established in 1789. The U.S. Treasury, right? Alexander Hamilton was its first secretary. The primary task of Treasury Secretary is to advise the president on domestic and international economic issues and implement the administration's economic policies. Okay, let me. The Federal Reserve System was created in 1913 in response to growing concerns that the U.S. financial system was being dominated and manipulated by a small number of banking institutions for the benefit of few business titans, right? It's most, oh my gosh, close these pop-up ads, golly. The Federal Reserve System was created in 1913 in response to growing concerns that the U.S. financial system was being dominated and manipulated by a small number of banking institutions for the benefit of a few business titans. Its most visible role is in adjusting the interest rates for loans between banks. These rates directly influence all other lending rates for consumers and businesses. The Fed strives to warm up a tepid economy or cool down a too hot economy by encouraging or discouraging lending and borrowing. The right balance keeps inflation and unemployment in check. The Fed adjusts the money supply by buying or selling Treasury debt on the open market. The overall goal is to ensure the lenders and borrowers have sufficient access to the money and credit. Federal Reserve also supervises and regulates banks operating in the U.S. What? The Federal Reserve. So it's not U.S. banks, right? The Federal Reserve also supervises and regulates banks operating in the United States. It's an independent government entity that includes 12 regional Federal Reserve banks. What are they? Their stockholders are private owned banks. They're not operated for profit. What? Their stockholders are privately owned banks that fall under the Federal Reserve System. You know, there's some things that don't pass the smell test, right? The 12, let's look up the 12 Federal Reserve banks and see where they're actually located. The 12 Federal Reserve District banks. Okay, they call them districts. Let me see. Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Cleveland, Richland, Atlanta, Chicago, St. Louis, Minnesota, Kansas, Dallas, and San Francisco. Let me see how many those are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. What happened to Goldman Sachs, and what happened to I can't remember. I used to remember all these. These are district banks. Where are the regional banks? Man, what in the world is this? "12 Federal Reserve regional banks." Those are all in our country. So Goldman Sachs isn't one. There's another one. If y'all can type it in the chat. I can't remember. I looked at this years and years ago. I'm talking like 20 years ago. I looked at this. Foreign. Stand by. Let me see. Let me just look up Goldman Sachs. I'm pretty sure that's a foreign Federal Reserve bank. Is it Goldman Sachs? Wow, there used to be a lot more information available. I don't know if they basically purged it from the internet. Bank. I don't know. I'm not going to spend much time because that's not fair to people, the listeners that are, here now on this live stream. If you can find that information, anybody can find that information. I used to have a list I kept, but that's that's long ago. The foreign Federal Reserve banks, who they were, right, where they were located. I had that information, but it's not coming up. Maybe I'm not typing in the proper search. You know what I mean? Whatever. But so, anyways, I'd like to say this again, and I want to go back over this because it's very important for those that have just came into the live stream. For those that want us to go back onto a gold-backed system, monetary system, where like we have gold uh, certificates, whatever, notes, whatever. Okay, go back to this article again, and I'll give you the source reference. This is from Time Magazine, titled "Money de Gaulle V" as for verse, right? The dollar. Money de Gaulle. That's Gaulle. De Gaulle, DE. And this article was dated February 12th, 1965. So what these countries were doing, these foreign countries, what they're doing, they were basically exporting their goods. They're getting the money in U.S. dollars. And what were they doing? They're dumping the U.S. dollars for gold. And it nearly depleted all of our gold reserves. So that's probably where all our money went. And these people, so they're keeping that secret. Now, there has to be something like this should go up to the court system. The United States should file a lawsuit, led by this current executive branch of government, because they're the ones to enforce the laws, to make sure that everything's done by the Constitution, that we see where our gold went to, or see how much gold there is there, right? That's very important. Doesn't everyone else think that's important? Even if you are for a gold-backed currency, are you for countries and other country leaders stealing all our gold or depleting all our gold? You know what I mean? To basically devalue our U.S. or our American dollar, was our American banknote, right? That's what our paper currency, in my opinion, should be. Okay, so go back to the beginning of the live stream, and I will read these. This is exactly what I said happened, and I couldn't remember, and I remembered enough the reason why I was kind of like arguing against gold-backed currency. And I remember reading this article a long time ago, but I had to I just did a Google search again, and I found it tonight before the night's live stream, so I can provide this as a source reference. So Charles de Gaulle, I believe he was like a prime minister or something of France, right? He was a high-level government official in France. I think probably the highest, right? What he did was, France was basically exporting their products to the United States. They were getting paid by dollars, US dollars, right? Federal Reserve notes. And then they were basically cashing in their Federal Reserve notes for gold, because it was gold-backed currency. And other countries started to also join that, right? I think Spain did that. I think they traded in $60 billion of US, or $60 million back then. Let's see. Just before de Gaulle spoke, Treasury Secretary Douglas Dillon made the first public admission that the U.S. payments deficit in 1964 moved higher than anyone had expected, and told It totaled about $3 billion, all of which the U.S. is legally committed to exchange for U.S. gold on demand. The Federal Reserve announced that the U.S. gold supply declined last week by $100 million to a 26-year low of $15.1 billion. France converted 150 million into gold last month. Plans another 150 million conversion soon. That's $300 million back then. That was a lot of money. Following that lead, and remember, gold back then was only like $30 an ounce, right? Following that lead, Spain has quietly exchanged 60 million of its dollar reserves for U.S. gold, the biggest such transaction of Franco era. To free more gold to meet rising demand, a congressional committee last week approved President Johnson's proposal to eliminate the 25% gold backing now legally required for deposits held in the Federal Reserve System. But concern is growing in Washington that nations that have so far refrained from converting dollars out of consideration for the U.S. may cash them in for gold once the extra bullion becomes available, and thus sends still more gold-laden truckloads rolling out of Fort Knox, not rolling into Fort Knox. Okay. So like I said, this is my opinion. The dollar, basically, not the specific dollar I'm talking about. American bank notes are what basically represents the United States economy. And basically, it's the currency that we will be using, I hope. And I hope there's a change in that. And that the American people support and back to an American bank note again, right? So we're not dependent on foreign countries or foreign monetary policy. If you want to do trade in America, right, you got to deal in American banknotes. That's what I hope changes. And what is American banknote backed up by? What is our GDP? Should be backed up by a percentage of our GDP. We got manufacturing, we have agricultural, right? We have our own metals, we have our own petroleum. We're not reliant. We can go back to becoming independent as far as our oil is concerned and our energy requirements instead of relying on foreign countries, which may become adversarial. Like, let's just use, for example, Iran. We're not talking about the Iranian people, right? That are God-fearing and they don't support murder and stealing and basically, what do you call that? False witnessing against other countries and other countries' people. They don't support, murdering other innocent civilians, no matter where they are. You know what I mean? So, anyways, when you go out there, and they've been going out there, not all the Iranian people, they're probably against this, especially those I remember back in the day when we were your allies under the Shah of Iran, and we even provided military weapons to Iran to help protect your sovereignty. Remember back in those days? Man, a lot of things have changed, right? So we have to consider, and I do believe the metals like gold and silver, like platinum, copper, aluminum, whatever, I do believe they should be traded. Well, yeah, there's a value placed on that. And who puts the value on the metals? Is it Congress? I don't know. I mean, that's going a little bit above my, I hate to say pay grade. That's ridiculous. It's going above my knowledge, right? So I guess supply and demand has a lot to do with our metal prices, right? Especially gold and silver. But uh, there's a lot of gold out there floating around, you know, um, floating around in space. I don't know. I mean, there's been talks about that too as well. But anyways, that's all I wanted to talk about. Is there anything here that I should, for the people, the four people who are still left on YouTube, is there anything I should clarify or something I said that don't make sense? Now, was there an amendment already to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5? Congress shall have the power to coin money or print money, right? Regulate the value thereof and of foreign coin and paper currency and fix the standards of weights and measures. Was there an amendment to that? Should there be an amendment to that? I'm not the smartest cookie in the jar, but I do believe our American banknotes, when and if we go back to them, um, should be valued by the Congress. And we got a lot of good things coming as far as our economy. If these people don't get us in these needless wars, they don't start World War III to try to get rid of our president, right? They don't they don't tank our economy just to try to get rid of our president. And people out there that says that's impossible. Remember, I like to draw your attention back to October 17th of 2019 on CNN's article, which was actually a Moody study from top level economists. What's the title of that article that CNN put out? Democrats need to sharpen their attacks on the Trump economy. Democrats need to sharpen, sharpen their attacks on the Trump economy. Think about that. They are willing, even on our own government officials, willing to tank our economy. We just saw it with the one big, beautiful bill, right? They didn't vote for it. Every single one of them, and two people in the U.S. Senate voted against it, right? Or was it two U.S. congressional representatives? I think it was two senators. But look, they voted, in essence, to take our economy, trying to take President Trump's likability or provability number or rating down into 30% so they can go out there and they'll have more support for their fraudulent impeachments. That's what it's all about. These people don't care. They're bought and paid for. Majority of our Congress are bought and paid for. Their allegiance isn't to the our U.S. Constitution. They don't support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. and have true faith and allegiance to the same, they got multiple other allegiances. You can see it. They even had allegiances with foreign countries calling death to America. At least their leaders of those countries were calling for death to America. They had foreign allegiances with them, particularly with them. That's the reason why President Trump only had to, due to OPSEC, operational security, he couldn't release the information. And they sent the bombers into the Pacific, right? I forgot what the area, and they were basically focused on that, right? Because if you had told these people, they would have leaked it, putting our men and women in uniform in grave danger, right? Putting their mission in grave danger. Remember, that was a defensive strike. Defensive strike on a country's leaders, mainly to take out their ability to develop a bigger nuclear weapons arsenal than what we believe they already have. Now, what is RH talking about now? I'm glad I didn't end the live stream basically on only those 2 points. Okay, I'm going to have to delete a couple of these source reference pages real quick. Delete all the Federal Reserve stuff. I spent a lot of time on that. Yeah, I remember back in, this has been already like 17 years ago. I had the source references. I had all the foreign Federal Reserve Bank, their names and everything, where they're located. You know what I mean? And now I do a Google search. I can't even find that anywhere. Okay. Got to delete this NAMBLA source reference pages. Grosses me out. Let's see here. Stand by. There's an article I'm going to basically Norm Eisen's perfectly legal color revolution against Trump. Okay. They're talking about a coup already, right? They've already been talking about this. Was dated from the Muse, June 6, 2025, and Norm Eisen's out there talking about he's pretty confident that they're going to be able to eject President Trump from office, right? So that's one of the source references I read. So I had this source reference. Now I got sidetracked and forgot what I was going to search. Okay. Banknote. Yeah. American banknote, right? If y'all can zoom in on that, you can Google search that America first, U.S. first paper currency. You can Google that yourself now. Now, I apologize. I forgot what I was going to. Basically, I was going to provide you another source reference, and I got distracted, and I forgot which topic we were on. Okay, so I do remember. Okay, we were talking about them purposely attacking our economy. They were attacking our economy. Even though they call it the Trump economy, they put that out there on October 17th of 2019, right? And the title of the article again: Democrats need to sharpen their attacks on the Trump economy to win. So the very next day, they told us how they were going to do it at Event 201, Global Pandemic Exercise based on the new coronavirus. Remember, that coronavirus was created in a lab. So all these people involved in that, right? All these people that helped facilitate and direct an invasion into our country, all these people behind the broader criminal conspiracy to overthrow our government, which includes President Trump, they're still doing it right now. And the only reason why they're doing it is because none of them have been held accountable. They got these billions and billions and billions of dollars. They're even funded by, in my opinion, foreign Federal Reserve banks because they don't want to upset the status quo, right? Because they've been making out like a bandit all these years. So that's just my opinion. So if you want to actually go back there, so again, October 17th, 2019, they don't mind attacking our economy just to drive for their own personal interest. This is about their own personal interest. Every single member of the U.S. Congress that were Democrat from the Democrat Party voted against the one big beautiful bill. And I think every Democratic senator voted against it too, as well. So the place card holder video tonight, I know I was just trying to find something pertinent, right? Was Dr. Paul Gosar on J6 reading out publicly the fraud of what happened. Now we have hindsight, perfect vision. Remember, again, you tie it all in together. There's trillions of dollars in foreign money at stake, or foreign countries at stake. Trillions of dollars for them at stake. Billions and billions of dollars at stake for people in our country. If they basically if they were successful in overthrowing President Trump. Remember, it's not just Comey and Brennan back behind that foreign, what do you call that, Russia stuff. They all knew was false, right? They continued to go on with it to do what? To drive down President Trump's likability numbers so people would support their fraudulent articles of impeachment. Those should be annulled. We should, the President of the United States and his council, they should be basically be suing to annul those articles of impeachment. And that should go all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court because it was fraudulent information that they cooked up, like the wrap-up smears that they based the fraudulent articles of impeachment on. Since when does our U.S. government, part of our U.S. government, hijack our country and basically force us into compliance with their coup to overthrow the other part of our government? Since when is that legal? It's not. So I'm glad people stuck around for the rest of this live stream. There's basically not much. We've known they've done this. Even to me right now, people that are wanting, a lot of people, in my opinion, look, I just read it in the article. Okay, I'll go back and read it again. What were they expecting to do? What were they going to do? They were going to hyperinflate. To counter criticism that the system would also paralyze international trade because of the global shortage of gold, champions of the gold standard advocate another step that they consider necessary to double or triple the $35 an ounce price of gold, thus vastly increasing the monetary reserves that finance world trade. Vastly increasing the monetary reserves that finance would trade. It's already up to $3,000, over $3,000 an ounce, right? What is that price tag, right? Just for 1 ounce of gold. Remember, there's 16 ounces in just 1 pound. Just 1 ounce of gold. Think about all the seeds you can buy and all the stuff you need supplies to basically grow your own crops. You could do that with like 1 ounce of gold, right? Probably have money left over. You know, you could buy a little small track riding lawnmower. You can put like a plow behind it, I guess, right? Plow your own. You could buy like a riding lawnmower for like about $1,500, I think. Of course, they get bigger and bigger, you know, and they're more costly. But just think about that. What about digging your own well? And for agricultural purposes. And it comes at times of national emergency, you can pop a filter on that, right? And it'll be safe to drink. Where you won't have to rely on anyone but yourself. Pray to God that your well doesn't run out of water for whatever reason. But anyways, yeah, if you go to event 201 highlights reel, you can basically watch it yourself. So how were they going to tank our economy? Think about it. If Trump wasn't the president of the United States implementing certain things like only 15 days to stop the spread, he wanted people back to work before Easter, remember? So somebody probably brought that article that CNN posted from top level economists from Moody Democrats need to sharpen their attacks on the Trump economy. See, they did it to us. And this should, even if you're Democrat, it doesn't matter who you're from. If you had relatives that lost their like mom and pop independent businesses because of what they did, they used what that was created in a lab. Who funded it? Okay, those people should be in prison right now. Oh, they got a pardon, right? Who pardoned them? Did actually Biden sign that? He probably didn't even know. Were those pardons even legal? There's a lot of questions about that. I mean, just think about the evil. They're willing to tank our economy, destroy our livelihoods, right? Destroy our mom and pop independent businesses, small business, right? Small businesses. And basically, in a way, we couldn't even afford our own food. So who right now at over $3,000 an ounce, who basically can afford that? Hey, and more power to you if you can afford it. You got a diverse portfolio, but what about all the rest of us? I'm not whining about it. What about all the rest of us that you leave no man, woman, or child behind? Oh, what? We can all starve to death because we're going to a gold-based currency, right? We don't have 401ks and all that stuff, How many people live on just Social Security alone? You know how much it costs for like a 2-bedroom apartment just to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in Florida now? In my area, it's like $2,000 a month. Do you got much money for food left over? Yeah, you might be able to retire. You might have a Social Security retirement check coming in. You're still going to have to go out and work, right? To make ends meet, they call it, right? Just for food. I mean, putting food and water on your or drinks on your tables, right? For your children. You probably got adult children still living with you because of that. Why? Democrats need to sharpen their attacks on our economy. Just exclude Trump because Trump is part of our economy. They're attacking our economy. They're attacking our livelihoods. So, no problem with that. How many of y'all making about $190,000 a year? I'm not complaining about what I get. It sure isn't $190,000 a year salary for working only 2.5 days a week. So what I'm going to try to do is there's 190,000 tons, they say, of gold in the world on planet Earth, or maybe in space too. Maybe Elon's got caches of gold bars floating around in space somewhere. Maybe one of his satellites. I don't know. So he won't lose it. Maybe NASA has. I mean, some top secret program. 190,000 tons. But that's the whole world, right? What I was told, it's enough gold to fill up just one Olympic-sized swimming pool. That's what I was told. I don't know if that would equate to 190,000 tons, but gold is really heavy. I think, is gold heavier than granite? I'm not sure. I know gold is softer than granite, that's for sure. But so 190,000 tons of that, how much gold do you believe that the United States has? We don't know because they won't even let the president, they won't even let Congress go in there and just take a look at it. They say sometimes some people are saying that the gold is it's not even gold, it's like lead or something with a gold color plating, right? It's not even gold. We don't know. The government, it's not like the government has never lied to us before, or certain members or large portion of the government. Like, remember Russia? And they got a Pulitzer Prize, right? A Pulitzer Prize. So, anyways, I try not to be too long-winded tonight, and it's already going on 1 o'clock, and I'd like to eat my supper now. It's already been prepared for me about 4 hours ago. So anyways, I appreciate y'all's support. If you share this live stream, hey, let's open up a civil conversation about the pros and cons of going back to a gold-backed currency. And what do you think is going to happen? It's already happened before. I believe all these countries, especially countries like China, like Russia, possibly Iran, they're going to take all those dollars. Remember, even Barack Obama sent a pallet worth of cash over to Iran. Maybe they saved that. Maybe saved all those dollars waiting for the day that we go back to gold-backed currency, right? And they'll cash in all their dollars for gold, right? To try to tank our economy and our currency, right? So I hope people really take a serious look into this. And again, in God we trust. Remember, everybody else we have to verify. God we trust. Everyone else, trust but verify. With that said, good morning, good day, good evening, wherever you're from. This concludes the live stream. And God bless. Thank you.